A great photo is comprised of three main elements: light, subject, and composition. As a photographer, your one job is to get the viewer to look at your subject. And we use composition to help us achieve that goal. Hey, I am Raymond Hatfield, a professional wedding photographer and host of the Beginner Photography Podcast. And in this video, we're going to walk through the three best compositions for beginner photographers that will be sure to take your photography to the next level. Composition is simply how you compose your frame, from how close you are to your subject, to what's in the background, your camera's height, angle. I truly believe that composition is the first thing that photographers should focus on when learning photography. Composition is what is going to make the biggest immediate impact on your images. What's also great about composition is that you can practice with just your cell phone, and you should. That's going to train your eye to see photographically more so than simply knowing what your settings are. It's also going to help you to capture a more compelling image when light is less than ideal. The first composition that we are going to talk about today is the rule of thirds. Now, this composition rule of thirds is talked about in every single photography composition video, and that is because it is so easy to implement, but also it makes a huge effect on your images. So we're going to look right here on my iPad, and I'm going to take these photos and just draw the composition over it to give you a better idea of how this works. So for rule of thirds here, imagine a tic-tac-toe board over your photo, right? And where the lines intersect is where our eyes naturally feel is very interesting. Our eyes are drawn to this spot. So if we look right here, we have, intersection of a line right there and my son's face, and then on the other side we have the activity that is going on in the background, and that is this water park. So I really didn't do much to this photo at all in terms of my settings or anything like that. I just simply put this photo in a good composition, and that's it. This photo right here is very similar, right? And you take the tic-tac-toe board right over the top, and then you put the lines over it, and then where those lines intersect, our eyes will naturally want to go. Now in this photo right here, this was the main element, right? This tree is the subject that I wanted to focus on, in part because it was a break in this very bright and beautiful sky. But then the rest of the frame I thought was interesting with the cloud covers, because it also is moving in that direction of the tree right there, and that to me makes the image very visually interesting. Once again, right here, nothing really special, but we put a tic-tac-toe board over our photo, and we have an intersection, we have an intersection, we have an intersection, and we have an intersection right there. It doesn't really take much because it's so simple, right? Put the horizon at the bottom line, put the sky or anything interesting at the top line right here, and anything interesting where those lines intersect, and that's it. This photo right here was taken in very bad light. It is not, a great photo. But let me ask, what is the subject of this photo? Is it this hat? Or is it my buddy Steve here, right? Which one? Once again, we're going to take our tic-tac-toe board and place it over our image, and wherever those lines meet, wherever they intersect, that is where whatever your subject is should be in that spot. So this photo, I could have been in front of him, and the hat could have been, right in front of my camera lens, and I could have been looking directly up at him, right? Camera could have been right here, and it could have been looking past the hat directly at him, but that photo would have been an entirely different photo, right? You wouldn't have got this was a hat that was an important hat. We wouldn't have got this, this shot of him looking at the hat. This photo only happens because of the rule of thirds. Here's a photo where I used a foreground element, my son, in this photo, once again, to draw our attention in. So this is technically a slightly more advanced, where I'm using foreground for blocking, right? But the rule of thirds still gets applied directly on top because our eyes look exactly where we want them to. My son feeding a stuffed Bucky the Beaver a spoonful of cereal. It's important to know that rule of thirds doesn't have to be complicated, and it works in most all situations. So if you're trying to take a photo and you see that, just something isn't working, my first thought would be to try to compose the shot in front of you with the rule of thirds and see what you can create. Next compositional element is leading lines. Now, think of leading lines as an arrow pointing directly at your subject, just minus the pointy bit. What is the subject of this photo right here? Well, it's my son riding his bike. Do we see any lines? Well, maybe not. Maybe we got this pole right here. No, we have very strong lines coming in to point right at him, coming in to point right at him, and even the houses make a line to point right at him and point right at him. What is the subject of this photo? Well, you're right. It's my daughter here. So what lines do we use? We have the horizon line, which leads right to her. We have the beach line, which leads right to her. We have the seawall line right here that leads right to her, and then the top as well. And then the rest of it, I tried to use a very toned down color palette so that your eyes go directly to her, because as photographers, our one job is to get people to look where we want them to look. This composition just helps us achieve that. Once again, rule of thirds in action. We got the sidewalk right here going to my daughter. We have the driveway right here pointing at my daughter. We have the street, which again, you don't naturally just look over here because there's nothing there, but the lines point towards her head. We also have the line of houses right here going straight to her. It's not overly complicated, but it works. Just like the sidewalk, the aisles of a store when you go shopping also work as a rule or as leading lines, right? They lead you to where you want your viewer of this photograph to look. So we have lines coming in this way, coming in this way, coming in this way, and all that it does is bring your attention to Steve's face. So while looking at this scene in person was pretty busy with all these cables and lines and wires and junction boxes, electrical boxes, I don't know, and busy bricks, it's hard to use something like the rule of thirds here because there's just so much going on. To make a photo like this stand out in this location, you have to use the most powerful composition for this, which in this case was leading line. So again, think of leading lines as an arrow pointing to your subject, just without the pointy bit. And if you're getting excited to go out and shoot now that you have a compositional starting point, let me know by hitting that thumbs up button below. And the last compositional technique that you can use to take better photos today is framing. Framing is quite literally putting a frame around your subject to tell your viewer, hey, look at me. When my son had his first virtual pandemic Zoom class session, I had to get a photo of it. And what was I going to use? There's two subjects to that photo, my son and the computer. So to get them both in this image, I used framing. The star of the show, the main subject, was my son. The secondary star of the show was the actual computer itself. So I focused on my son and used the computer to take up the majority of the frame right here, right, as nothing, in an attempt to get you, the viewer, to look where I want you to in this photo, my son. Framing doesn't literally have to be a door frame or a window frame. It can be any sort of frame. You can make your own frames. Like in this case right here, there was a bottle on the counter and then I think like a box of Cheez-Its or something like that. And I brought the camera down and just shot in between them because you don't need to see the couch. You don't need to see the TV. You don't need to see all that. You don't need to see the coffee maker. You don't need to see the, decorations that my wife put there. That's not the star of the show. The focus of this image is my son who was flipping a bottle. So I used these two elements to create my own frame for you to look through, again, as the photographer, getting you to look where I want you to look. From a composition standpoint, I like this photo a lot because you're not going to look anywhere but my son's face right there. Why is that? Why is it that in some photos you look exactly where you need to and in others you don't? In this case, it's the composition. Not only do we have a strong frame right there, which is what we're talking about right now, but we also have rule of thirds into play, right? And leading lines from the tree right here, from the top of the playground, from this railing. It all works together to bring your attention to the main subject of the photograph. My friend here in the foreground was teaching an actor how to play a specific riff on a guitar. How do you show that in a photograph? Do you show the two of them together, right next to each other? The main subject is the actor trying to learn because he's the one who is going through the transformation of not knowing how to play to then being able to play. So if he's the main subject, how do I use framing to get your attention to look right at him? I used my buddy here to create a frame so that you don't really look at anything over here and you look directly at the actor who is intently looking at this guitar to figure out, okay, where do I need to place my hands to play this riff? This photo is very busy with all the lines and the different colors and the houses behind and the movement and the shapes and all of that. How do you get the viewer's attention to look exactly where you want them to look? You put your subject in a frame. That's it. So let's go ahead and recap real quick. The 3 compositions that you can use to increase the visual value of your photos is the rule of thirds, leading lines, and framing. So what composition are you most excited to focus on the next time you head out with your camera? Let me know in a comment below. I am a big fan of trying to make things as simple as possible. And while there are, many different photo compositions, if you focus on just these 3, the quality of your photos is going to grow exponentially. Well, that's it for today. Until next time, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.